Hello, my name is Nicole Börner from the Institute of Geosystems and Bioindication of the Technische Universität Braunschweig. And I'm the scientific coordinator of our international research training group, Geoecosystems in Transition on the Tibetan Plateau, short TransTib. We are a structured doctoral program and we are offering, of course, interesting courses for our doctoral students and also quite interesting research. Especially research in Tibet. And we know that some regions of the world are more sensitive to global climate change than others. We know of the Arctic or Antarctica, but it's also happening on the Tibetan Plateau.
On the Tibetan Plateau, the temperatures are rising 2 to 3 times the global average, and also the precipitation brought by the monsoon is changing considerably during the individual years. These environmental conditions are affecting how much carbon dioxide may be stored or released by the alpine steppe ecosystem, which may contribute to global warming.
So we are a cooperation of different institutions and universities in Germany as well as in China. And the Technische Universität Braunschweig is the leading university on the German side. And we are cooperating with the Leibniz University Hannover, the Friedrich Schiller University in Jena, the Max Planck Institute for Biogeochemistry in Jena, and also the Helmholtz Center for Geosciences, the GFZ in Potsdam. And on the Chinese side, we are mainly cooperating with the Institute of Tibetan Plateau Research of the Chinese Academy of Sciences.
My part in the TransTib project deals with the origin of the water for millions of people. The water is stored as ice in glaciers and in the subsurface under permafrost conditions. Especially in these remote areas we can observe the glacier melting and the degradation of permafrost without anthropogenic influence.
The most interesting thing when you are on the Tibetan Plateau that you have these vast landscapes. So it always looks like, okay, you walk half a day and you are at this mountain range. But at the end, I don't know, you walk for a whole week. So these kind of distances we know, for example, from Germany, where you can't see really far away. That's completely different up there. You always have these vast grassland areas, these really big lakes. For example, Namzoser Lake we are working on, that is four times bigger than our Lake Constance. And of course, in the background, you always have these high mountain ranges and these snow-covered mountains, and that is fantastic.
My aim is actually to look for how the groundwater is flowing and actually what kind of quality the groundwater has. We choose the Chagu subcatchment because there is no glacial influence, and which means that the precipitation which is coming down is the main part for the recharge of the groundwater. The precipitation is already changing due to the climate change, and when the precipitation and the evaporation is also changing, means that we also have changing in the recharge to the groundwater. So that's actually what I really want to study, and that's why I want to develop a 3D groundwater flow model for this subcatchment. So the main idea of this is to simulate how climate change is changing the groundwater level here on the Tibetan Plateau.
The animals you see most up there are the yaks and of course goats. These are the animals that are used for herding, and they are wandering around the area throughout the year.
When we first came here in this catchment in 2018, we were actually not expecting what you can see here. This really green and lush environment with a lot of water. We have a lot of nomads, Tibetan nomads that live with their yaks from this area and who use their yaks to produce food, to produce goods for trading.
So in the first year, of course, it was very new to all doctoral students, so they had to acclimatize to the region to see what is there, where can they work on, what kind of things are available, what kind of devices, for example, they have to bring the next time if they want to do some more detailed studies. And it's always, I think, important to go there not only once, but at least twice to see how the changes are between the first and the second, to get a relation, because the weather is always changing. You have always different conditions up there.
now in recent days we are under very extreme conditions of man-made climate change that is affecting the whole world, and this is also affecting High Asia, and High Asia supplies water for billions of people in the lower river catchments in India and Asia and in China, for example. But of course it also is the source of life for the people that live here.
So the first time we were there before the monsoon season, so before most of the rainfalls of the whole year are coming down to the Tibetan Plateau. And in the second year we were there after the monsoon season, so after all the rain fell. And this gives us some insights into the seasonality of changes that we are looking at.
It's always supposed to be that the alpine grassland act as a carbon sink, and they absorb more carbon from atmosphere. But with this recent climate change scenario, we can see that some areas like wetlands, like here, producing more carbon or releasing more carbon to the atmosphere than absorbing that. To find out if an ecosystem is a sink or is a source of CO2, there is many methods that we can measure that and estimate that. So one of these methods is using these collar and chambers. Here I would measure the CO2 producing by microbes, by plant roots, and all coming from the chemical reaction by oxidizing methane, and measuring the CO2 respiration in a specific area, and then I can somehow estimate the whole CO2 respiration of the ecosystem. At the end, I wanted to see if these kind of wetlands are going to absorb more carbon in the future climate scenario, or they are going to be a source for carbon.
Now we are here investigating the soil profile that we have found not far away from our stream, and what you can see here is a huge organic material and top horizon in the upper 50 centimeters of this profile, and underneath the actual morainal material which this whole area is built up from. And what is actually surprising us here is that the topsoil is so huge, because we are not far away from the glacier, and this all would need to be created in only a few thousand years.
My major is about carbon dioxide exchanges between the alpine steppe ecosystem and the atmosphere. Why does it matter? The alpine steppe ecosystem covers an area of roughly 800,000 square kilometers and stores ample amount of carbon within its soils. I'm using a decovariance measurement complex, which was established by our Chinese partners from the Institute of Tibetan Plateau Research in 2005. It consists of an ultrasonic anemometer, which measures the wind in 3 dimensions, and an infrared gas analyzer, which measures the CO2 and the water vapor concentration in ambient air. This is the so-called planetary boundary layer tower, which measures the different meteorological parameters in different heights. In this case, we measure the temperature, the relative humidity, the wind speed and wind direction in 5 different heights, and also we measure the soil moisture and the soil temperature in 5 different depths. I hope that with these parameters I can compare the carbon dioxide fluxes and to gain insight into the carbon cycle governing the phenology of the alpine steppe ecosystem.
So we're also using satellite data in order to trace surface changes over years. So we can use our microwave data over several years in order to trace surface changes on the range of centimeters or even millimeters. Now it is very important that even though we can cover a very large area with our satellite measurements, that we still go into the field and do some ground measurements like this one for ground truthing and validating of our satellite results, because it's always better to have independent data sets that can validate each other. And basically what we're doing is we are scanning the surface area of the glacier and the surrounding structures, and we will do the same again in about 4 weeks' time, and then we will compare our results, and we will see, hopefully we shall see, what has changed in that time period.
Yeah, and then we want to find out how all these different fluxes affect the lakes itself.
My major is paleolimnology. I mainly use diatoms and other geochemistry processes to reconstruct the past environmental conditions.
Hello, I'm Paula. I'm a PhD student in Transtip, and I'm using aquatic bioindicators such as ostracods, chironomids, and the group Arselinity to reconstruct or to know the changes in the hydrology of the Lake Namso. And this is a very important area because it's in a very high altitude and it's remote and with not too much anthropogenic input. And we are also taking water samples and sediment samples, and the idea is to characterize these different rivers, measuring the chemistry of the water and the sediment, and also correlate it with the species that we can find in this area. And with this, we can detect different sources of water, and we can differentiate different types of waters and different assembles of the species.
We want to take 3 meters core, use the gravity collar, and right now Stan use the weight to push down the tubes inside the sediments. After dating, we'll know from the bottom to the top, we know how long of this core. For example, here we're dating the result is 200 years ago, and here is recently. So we know the history of this period.
When I'm looking into the past, I can make some inferences about the climate change. So for example, when there is a high temperature, I can have more evaporation and high conductivity, and some species of ostracods or chironomids or tecamelians are going to be very special or indicators of these conditions.
My name is Sten. I'm working at the Transtrip project as a postdoc, where my task is to identify various bioindicators via their DNA. And here my task is to find out is the DNA method suitable to study paleolimnology in Lake Namso. So each organism contains of DNA that we know, of course, and there are specific regions that we can identify the species. And this can be especially important in the high pH and alkalinity water, where those morphological structure of the diatoms and ostracods may just simply dissolve and we do not see anything. But with the DNA method, perhaps we can still detect the community assembly changes in the water.
For me, it's a pleasure to work in this remote area because there are special features and some processes that I couldn't observed in other places of the world. And then we have this special spiritual background of the Tibetans that is very interesting to see how they live with the landscape and from the landscape.
So I for myself like very much that I learn a lot. So there are people from all kind of disciplines of biosciences, geosciences, physical sciences. So it's always something new you learn. And of course it's a lot of fun to organize all these things, to organize conferences, to organize summer schools, and to organize fieldwork, especially as I'm allowed to go there too.